Hi guys, it's Ruth. It's day 14, so we're right at about 2 weeks since we found out that baby didn't have a heartbeat, and I wanted to take some more time to talk about the practical aspects of miscarriage, because while it can be difficult to talk about, and of course it's going to vary drastically from person to person, and of course none of this should be taken as medical advice, I think that hearing a first-hand account can really dispel fear in someone who's in the midst of so much unknown. So this is kind of how it went for me. It's probably going to be a bit of a long video. In fact, I might even have to break it into 2 videos because there's just so much about it that I want to share. So I was about 13 weeks when we found out that baby had died, but he had stopped growing 2 to 3 weeks before the sonogram, and so this was considered an early term miscarriage. Miscarriages are broken into kind of 3 categories: early term, which is kind of in the first trimester, maybe a little bit later; late term, which is up to about 20 weeks, and then after that, usually they're considered a stillborn. So the protocol that they use here, and they chose to use with me, is a series of 2 medicines, and if that doesn't cause the body to expel the baby and the placenta and everything else so that your body can heal, then you go on to have a D&C. So we found out on Tuesday that baby had died, and I checked into the hospital Tuesday night, and we requested that they start the procedures right away. They were concerned about me having enough sleep, but I didn't see how sleeping in the hospital with people coming in to check on me and unfamiliar sounds was going to help anything. So we asked them to start it right away. I took the medicine at about 6:00 p.m. and it was by mouth, so I was on no IV or anything, wasn't hooked up to anything at this point. And so it was 8 tiny little white pills. And for the first 24 hours, I felt nothing. So if nothing happens within 48 hours, or if the body doesn't expel everything within 48 hours, then they start a second medicine. The first one's called mifepristone, and the second one is misoprostol. So the mifepristone, the purpose of it is to cause the cervix to dilate and kind of kickstart the miscarriage, and with the hope that your body will kind of take over and complete the miscarriage on its own. Like I said, for the first day, I didn't feel anything, and it was a lot of waiting. I think I watched some TV, had lots of visitors, cried a lot, talked a lot. But about 4 o'clock on the next day, so about 22 hours in, I noticed a little bit of cramping and maybe a little bit more spotting. Nothing that I couldn't handle. I would compare it to the very early stages of labor, where you can kind of feel your cervix stretching and opening, maybe even before labor starts. Then within just about 4 hours, kind of suddenly things kicked up in speed, and I became so uncomfortable that I was like, I would like to take the ibuprofen now. So around this point, I kind of was laughing at myself because the pain had shifted from just a dull ache, kind of stretching feeling, to a rhythmic pain, sharper and more distinct. And the reason I was kind of laughing at myself is because all of a sudden I realized what I was experiencing was contractions. Of course, the contractions that I had experienced in the past with my live births took my entire stomach, my entire torso, and much of my whole body. And so when people talked about having contractions, that's more what I was expecting. But of course, at that point, my uterus is still just about the size of a grapefruit, maybe a little bit larger. And so it was much lower and more distinct than I was expecting. But they were about 30 seconds to a minute long and 3 to 4 minutes apart. So just after a couple hours of this, I was in quite a bit of pain, and I started kind of panicking. If this is how the first day is, if this is how much pain I'm already in, like how am I gonna get through a whole night and another day of this before they start the second medicine? And then about 9 o'clock at night, all of a sudden there was just this kind of pop and a release of pain and a gush. And so I knew that something had changed. So I went into the restroom. I told my husband what was going on, and at this hospital they provide this kind of bucket thing that sits in the toilet to catch anything that comes out of you. So I had this kind of bout of all this stuff coming out of me. It only lasted a couple of minutes, and then there was kind of a break from it, and then there was some more, maybe a couple more contractions, and then another bout of gushing, and then it seemed like it had kind of concluded. So I cleaned myself up a bit, and I could see that the baby, the fetus, was in the bucket, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is all. So I went and got my husband, and I knew for us that it was really important that we have time with the baby itself. I wanted to be able to see how far along he was and count his fingers and toes and have a couple pictures. So this ended up being a really precious time for us. I hadn't called in the nurse. I don't know, they probably would have preferred that I did, but I decided that I didn't need to at this point. And I wanted to protect this time, just the two of us. I know the culture here, they don't see the purpose of a person seeing the dead baby, and so but like I said, I knew it was important to me. So this my husband and I took some time and took some pictures, and he was this tiny, perfect little thing. And yeah, so after about a half an hour, I started bleeding again, and I realized, I need to go ahead and lay down, and we'll call the nurse and all that. So we put the baby into the box that I mentioned, and I went back to the bed and rested and called for the nurses. So that was unfortunately only the first half of my miscarriage, and I will share more on the second half tomorrow, because I don't want this video to get too long, and I think that thanks for watching.